received Elizabeth's email saying she's phoning in, so good to hear from you, Elizabeth. Hopefully your line will be nice and clear for you.
Thanks, Jim.
So with that, I'll go on to ask for apologies or declarations of interest. Sian.
Sorry, Convener, we've got apologies from Reverend Burt and also from Anna McMillan, the parent representative. McElhenney. Anyone else? No. Okay. Are there any further declarations of interest in relation to the education items? No.
No.
Thank you.
Sian, can I just say you've done that really, really well there.
Thank you very much,
just
Convener.
want to say that, you know, it's exceptional.
Thank you. I will always remember that. Thank you.
This is Sian's last Education and Communities Committee. I feel as if I've been saying that quite a lot to you, Sian, but you will be missed. So hopefully the committee, the education side of it will go as smoothly as the community side this afternoon.
Thank you, Convener.
So again, as normal, if you could indicate in the chat if you want to speak, comment or ask a question. If not, I'll try and see you anyway if you're waving frantically at me. So with this in mind, what I would do first of all is I would ask that we include the extra agenda item number 6, which is the S1 intake for Port Glasgow High School for academic year 2021-2022. Is that okay that we include that? Thank you. And with that, can I ask Ruth to introduce agenda item number 4? And again, as normal, I would say to members that we have officers here able and willing to answer any questions. Ruth?
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So this is the performance report for the education part of the Education and Communities Committee. 5.1 highlights the position around the revenue budget. 5.2 highlights issues around the capital budget, and just to be clear, this report is asking for 2 things. One is to note the reports, but also if I can refer your attention to 5.2.1, we're also asking the committee to note and approve the temporary allocation of future years life cycle funding to contain the expenditure within the current funding model for the 172k overspend on St Mary's Primary School. I know that Eddie has some updates on even the report itself, and I'll hand over to Eddie just to give you some updates on the particular items in the report.
Thank you, Ruth. Eddie?
Thanks, Convener. Thanks, Ruth. Just as mentioned there, obviously the first item in St Mary's, it is an item for noting and approving the current over expenditure and the fact that we're still in negotiations with the contractor on the final account. I'll only note any progress or notable progress on the items since the report was concluded. So on Gourock Primary School, we have the tender returns, and we are hoping to be in a position to have a final tender report by the end of this week, which will then allow us to prepare an emergency powers report to then progress an acceptance, hopefully the week after, and that will get that project moving again. On the Kelly Street Children's Centre demolition and landscaping works, we've now issued a formal letter of acceptance, and the contractor is on board, and again we're looking at a start in April for that one. On the interactive whiteboard works, we have got one secondary school complete. Clyde View in Notre Dame will be complete by the end of this week, and we're looking to complete the third at Inverclyde Academy starting next week after school hours and completing before the end of the financial year. And that's a kind of main items of progress. I know in the early years side there's notes in there about Rainbow and Larkfield, and they are progressing on site, slightly behind the programme as noted within the report. Well Park, there's a little bit of confusion in the update. That actually is on site and progressing, and Glen Park has been accepted and will be starting on site in the near future. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Ruth, anything else from you?
Nothing from me.
Okay. I'll leave it open for questions for members. it's Councillor MacLeod. Have you got any questions?
Yeah, can I just ask regarding the interactive whiteboard refresh? I know that certainly when there's you know, a lot of equipment in the past, you know, if it can be used elsewhere, it's been put to good use. I just wonder if the old whiteboards are been able to be used by somebody else and gone on for use somewhere else.
Yeah, through you, convener. There's a certain amount of the equipment is being retained for spares. The kind of projectors that probably were younger and able to be reused by the authority. The remainder of the equipment is being responsibly disposed of. So the suppliers that we use all sign up to different sub-suppliers who then take the equipment and they either reuse it or they recycle all of the equipment. So it is responsibly dealt with. Yep.
Okay, Jim?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Lynn?
Yeah, just a quick question under 5.2.2 Group Primary. So it was just to say, so obviously we're saying we're looking at maybe towards the 19th of March. So and mentioned emergency power. So is that to appoint the contractor immediately, or will it need to come back to committee? I'm just wanting to know if that's like once they get through under emergency powers, we can go ahead, or it needs to come back through committee through the next cycle.
Yep, through you, convener. No, if we use emergency powers and if it is approved, that is the authority to then progress acceptance of a contract, and thereafter we will engage with the contractor. There'll be a mobilisation period after that, as there always is with construction contracts, and then they will start on site. So subject to us getting the final tender report, which we should have by the end of this week, the emergency powers report will then be progressed either at the end of this week or early next week, and if that's approved, they will then be formally accepted.
I can assure you, Lynn, I think it'll probably be me, Liz, and maybe Stephen that will get the emergency powers. We do realise this has been lying here for a year, over a year now. So if the emergency powers come through, it'll be signed. I assume it'll be signed off right away, because we do recognise the delay in this project, and you know, the distress that's probably been caused both the kids and the parents as well.
Sorry, I just meant to say I did attend the Parent Council Zoom meeting last night, or WebEx meeting last night. I couldn't tell them much, but I did give them a brief update, and along the same lines as I'm advising committee. So,
okay, thanks, Eddie. Lynn, is that okay? Okay. Chris has got a comment regarding starting back at school next week. Chris?
No, I jumped the gun, convener. I'll wait till the next agenda item.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Do we have any other questions for this agenda item? Elizabeth?
I'm fine, Jim, thanks.
You're okay? Can we approve the paper? Make sure we have the changes at the recommendations, either Diane or Sian, and put them through and agree with those amended recommendations. Okay, thank you, everyone. If we could go to agenda item number 5, which is the expedited business, and again I'll let Ruth introduce this paper. Ruth?
Okay, so this is the expedited business. I'll go through each paragraph individually and then perhaps get questions at the end, if that's possible. So 5.1 is has already been replaced by the addendum that was sent out to members of the committee yesterday. So this is the very latest position we have on the opening of our schools come the 15th of March. So on the 15th of March, all of our primary pupils will be back, and the provision will be broadly similar to that before Christmas in the bubbles. Secondary schools, secondary schools are required to keep 2 meters physical distancing between learners up till the 5th of April and between learners and teachers. Anticipated direction of travel, and the head teachers are working through this at the moment, is that the senior phase will broadly be in for about 50% of the time. It won't be exact, but it will be 50% of the time, and we hope to get the broad general education in for 1 day each week. We also have to provide the broad general education in school for the key workers and vulnerable children, and that is being worked through today as we speak. The transport will be tricky, getting the timetables to match up with the transport, but that's what officers are working on today and tomorrow, to look at the capacity of the transport to be able to get the pupils to school. It's not 2 metres on the transport. What they're describing is a zigzag method, one person in each row sitting alternately, one next to the window, the other's not, and we will work through that. But we may have to make slight alterations to the transport provision or put extra provision on. The school meals will continue in school for all those who are in school, and the payments will continue pro rata for those who are not. On Friday evening, the Intercept Days were announced. That is for secondary pupils only, not for primary, and it is for quality assurance and assessment. We are currently negotiating with the head teachers and the LNCT as to when those dates will be, and we will communicate them as soon as we know more. The 5.2 is about support for mental health in place for young people during the COVID pandemic and also as we go forward. And that gives an overview of the types of interventions we have, and also a link to the Action for Children, which has proved to be very, very popular. And I know the Head of Education, Michael, wrote to every single secondary pupil telling them of the fact that this provision was available. 5.3 gives an overview of remote learning, what we have had in place, and the types of guidance we have given to our schools. Again, I would say Inverclyde has performed very well in this. We have recorded a lot of recorded contact for ClickView, and at the last update I got, we were over a third of the West online offer. So for a small authority, we were punching well above our weight for the amount of lessons our teachers were recording. SQA qualifications, we are working through that as we speak. So basically the delay there's been a delay to the 25th of June for submissions. All of the assessments will be undertaken. There are procedures being put in place for quality assuring those, moderating those, and the SQA, as you may be aware from the national press, are looking at the appeals process and what that may look like. I would say there will probably be interesting times ahead with the exam process over the coming months. The vaccinations for education staff and asymptomatic testing. Currently, we have all the staff with access to asymptomatic tests, all the senior phase pupils, and when we return after Easter, we've just heard that they will also be using asymptomatic tests for broad general education as well, and that's just been organised as we speak. 5.6, the Scottish Government grants for education, and this paragraph is asking for approval. So basically, we have received a £717,000 share of a grant to support schools with recovery, and outlined is how we anticipate spending that grant. That particular grant, I suspect there's a lot more different pots of money around, but this is particularly in relation to that grant for education recovery. Our direction of travel will always try to be to get recovery teachers and support pupils in as much as we can, but also to beef up the ICT for the use in the schools. And then 5.7, again, this is asking for an approval. This is for the Education Authority Equality Mainstreaming report. If members remember last year, there's the Council Educational Mainstreaming report, but Education have to publish a separate report. So that's been sent as an appendix, and also we're asking you to agree the equality outcomes that are in the bullet points at the end of 5.7. 5.8 gives an update on the food and nutritional guidance that comes in on the 8th of April, and paragraph 6 is the operational log for us for this committee.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Ruth. We've got a number of questions. I'll go to Chris Curley first. Chris.
Thanks, Chairman. Advantages for jumping the gun then. Basically, questions related to the wearing of masks in secondary schools. I know the First Minister said that masks should be worn, but I think our agenda item and the addendum doesn't mention anything about masks. So if officers could give an update on that, because I think it's important that we have sort of a clarity on that. And also on 5.6 with respect to the Wi-Fi infrastructure, it doesn't mention anything about Wi-Fi infrastructure in secondary schools. Is that because it's deemed that Wi-Fi infrastructure in secondary schools is acceptable? Because I know that what do you call it, certainly in Glasgow campus, it can be a little bit hit and miss.
Ruth?
Through you, convener. So when the addendum was written, we didn't have the technical guidance out, so that appeared yesterday, I think. So my understanding is there's a requirement for all secondary pupils to wear masks. So that information simply wasn't available to us until we'd seen the technical guidance. And there's no reason for omitting secondary schools. They've been done already. Some of the primary schools hadn't. So it's that the secondary schools have upgraded their Wi-Fi already. So this is now taking it down to the primaries.
Okay.
Thanks, Ruth. Michael, do you wish to comment on that, or no? That's fine. The next one is Martin Brennan. Martin.
Thank you, Jim. First of all, I'll preface my question by saying that I realise that the service is doing everything possible. But I just wondered, can you drill down to individual pupils when we're talking in 5.3 about levels of engagement? Do we have a sense of how every pupil is performing?
I'll perhaps hand over to Michael, but the answer is yes, and we've been asking head teachers to track that, but I'll hand over to Michael.
Michael?
Yes, through you, convener. Yes, absolutely. We've tracked engagement in a very similar way that we would track attendance. Our main premise for that has been safeguarding, so that we are certain that we have contact with all pupils. And in fact, the secondary schools have gone beyond that to track engagement period by period, particularly in the majority of cases where they're following their timetable. So yes, absolutely, we know the level of engagement for individual pupils, more in a primary school on a daily basis, but in the secondaries it's even more granular than that, period by period.
Okay, Martin. Yep. David Wilson. David?
Yeah, thank you very much, convener. I'm finding that my constituents, the parents, really as keen as mustard for their children to return to school, not just the primary school, but the secondary. It's driving some of them up the wall. And I see scant reference to parents in all of this. We seem to be listening to the teaching unions and not necessarily to our parents. And my question really, and I don't know where you can answer it, Ruth, if all our schools had to have gone back yesterday, all our schools, primary and secondary, could we have handled that?
Ruth?
We would always follow the national guidance, and the national guidance works within what's possible within the scientific evidence. So there is an element of problem solving around it. So, for instance, the 2 meter distancing will mean that you need more space. So there is always a pragmatic working through the solutions. What I would say is we are listening to parents, because every 2 to 3 weeks we have all the chairs of the parent councils meet with myself and Michael and Tony as representatives, and we hear their concerns. We also respond to any issues they may raise to us. So we appreciate it's been a difficult time for a lot of parents and a lot of families where we're in very unusual circumstances, and certainly home education, people have had their own story to tell through that. Not always negative, sometimes very, very positive as well. So we've got to take all that with us. But if we were to be opening tomorrow and the national guidance supported it and the scientific guidance supported it, Inverclyde would of course do its absolute duty in making that happen.
I'm sure that Inverclyde would do its duty. Just elsewhere in the world have started yesterday.
Yeah. Stephen?
Yeah, I think by elsewhere in the world, I think Councillor Wilson means England.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have to follow the directions of the Scottish Government, who do tell us when we can open our schools and how we can open our schools. So, I mean, what I'd like to say first of all is I think we should record our thanks to everyone who's been supporting both remote learning and in-school learning over this very difficult and challenging period. And I mean, obviously, teachers support part, but the whole education system within Inverclyde who've played their part in an enormously challenging period of time. One of the questions, or the question I wanted to ask, was around adherence to mitigations. As some of you will know, I've got a role at a national level in terms of the Education Recovery Group, and regularly there have been concerns raised by trade union colleagues around councils not adhering to mitigations and implementing them fully. And what I'd like to ask in an Inverclyde context is what arrangements we have in place for monitoring compliance with the guidance that we've got, and what arrangements are in place should people have concerns, whether that be staff members or pupils indeed, have concerns that mitigations are not being followed.
Okay, I'll take Ruth in first. Ruth.
Okay, so through you, convener, we have EIS health and safety reps in our schools who, right from the beginning, have been involved in the risk assessments in place as the guidance has changed as well. So every time the guidance changed, we review our risk assessments. If anyone is not happy, the first point of call is to take it through their either head teacher, line manager, or through the unions, and we have weekly meetings with all of the unions to see any issues arising, for us to be able to problem solve together any of the things we may come across. We look at the newly revised guidance, any things around for instance, ventilation and what's put in place, and we are constantly evaluating, constantly listening, and constantly reviewing. So there's lots of things going on. To date, we have had very positive relationships with the unions. We've been able to overcome any issues by the end of a week, I would have to say.
Okay, Stephen.
Yeah, I'm reassured that I'll be able to feed that back to my friend Larry Flanagan the next time I see him.
And with that, can I ask Natasha, for your question?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, my question is around the mental health provision under 5.2 for young people. It says here it's during the pandemic. How long do we have this contract in place for, and do we have any longer term plans for, obviously the effects of this pandemic are going to be felt for quite a while to come?
Okay, I'll let Michael come in on that one. Michael?
Through you, convener. Yes, so the contract with Action for Children is linked to government funding for counselling in schools, but also, I think as we've mentioned before, that funding is augmented by funding from across the partnership. So we are coming, believe it or not, to this, or we're at the 6-month point of the first year of Action for Children, and there will be an annual report to committee, and the funding is there beyond. It's not a 1-year funding stream, so it's ongoing. So the service is absolutely there for the foreseeable future, very much linked to the 2 funding streams that I've mentioned. The contract is under constant review from myself, and as the report mentions, our principal educational psychologist and partners in health, to make sure that it's as agile as it can be, particularly at the moment in terms of service delivery during lockdown. And since communicating to parents and pupils about the service, we've seen a rise in referrals that go into a triage system. So we know, and we're monitoring over time, that the service is being picked up. It's not just counselling, it's a wellbeing service, so there are other aspects of it in terms of delivery in school through curriculum delivery and group delivery as well. We will obviously review the service at its annual point, and if we feel that there's any aspects of it that we need to change in response to the pandemic, then that will be done.
Okay, Natasha.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Michael.
Lynn.
Yeah, thanks. I've just got a question on 5.7. Just before I ask my question, I think just to kind of add my thanks, you know, as a parent of, I've got a primary, I've got a BGE and I've got a senior, and the level of information coming out, especially today, I think I need an admin assistant though to go through because I've got one for each person. But actually the level of information, exactly what child's to go and when they're to go and all the other about when they're going to get their lunch and everything. So it's really just to congratulate everybody involved in that, because, you know, I've received it for 3 individuals. They've been doing it for, you know, hundreds of kids. And to tie all that in must be such a huge task. And probably just to reassure Councillor Wilson that you do get regular, you know, I think it's weekly where you're asked to complete another survey. But all these things are good because everything that's been fed in, they have tweaked it pretty quickly and it's came back to you. So I don't think we could have asked for anything more, actually. It has been kind of overwhelming, and obviously overwhelming with teachers that are dealing with their own personal circumstances and their own families. So I just want to pass on my thanks as a parent, really, as well as an elected member. So, but I'll go on to my question now. So it was just a quick question under 5.7 in terms of the equalities. It was just, it says reduced identity-based bullying and harassment. It was just to establish, is that a specific characteristic, or is it going to cover the whole range of them?
Ruth?
Through you, convener, this came out of the Health and Wellbeing Survey. So where we asked if people had received anything, any bullying and harassment linked to identity-based, and there was a higher linkage across that than we had wanted to see. So particularly what the young people were telling us was there is something linked to identity-based. I think what was in people's minds was around probably gender. But I would say it would be linked to anything. The question said identity-based, so the pupils would have put their own interpretation into that. So we will do the same.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. Is that okay, Lynn?
Yep, great, thanks.
Francis, I notice you've got your microphone off. Are you wanting to ask a question, or is that just off for?
No, let me just put that on. No, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, all right. No, everything's fine. Just one thing to clarify, if I could ask Ruth, are all the schools, secondary schools across Inverclyde, are they all following exactly the same pattern in terms of time for senior phase and time for BGE, or there are any individual school differences?
The schools have worked together on the timetabling of this. They did this right from the beginning when we started to look at the senior phase timetable for practical subjects, and the best way to do this, and they went into a columns system because that was going to be the easiest one to upskill when we came back to what we anticipated this next step to be. So they've worked together on this. Now the advantage of that, of course, is in the timetabling ability, so they can look at that, and actually we've got a provision across Inverclyde which is broadly similar. Don't get me wrong, there will be some individual differences depending on different types of classes and availability, and of course that's going to happen, and also for the amount of pupils who are maybe more vulnerable, then there will be differences in that, but broadly speaking they're running a similar timetable.
Right, that's great. Thanks, Ruth. Thanks, Jim.
Okay, Francis. I'm going to go to...
I should just one thing, actually, in the broad general education, it's slightly different across schools. There are 2 different models that they're looking at for the order in which they're in the broad general education, just because it suits the buildings differently.
That's what I was thinking about. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Ruth. Thanks, Jim.
I'm going to go to the phone lines. I'm going to go to Elizabeth first of all. Elizabeth, are you there? I think I might have lost Elizabeth. I'll go to Jim. Jim, have you got any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. First of all, if I can just add my thanks to obviously all our schools, our teaching staff, and other staff in the schools for the last year, and obviously working during a very difficult period of time. So thanks to everyone involved there. Regarding 5.2 support for mental health, it's good to see Action for Children and is offering this service our young people, both with mental health issues and also for other well-being aspects. I just wondered what sort of numbers of young people have sought help or been referred to the service since it first started.
I'll let Michael come in. He's probably the best. Michael?
Through you, Convener. Councillor MacLeod, I don't have the exact figures. I mean, what I would say to you is it has increased over time. So as we started to communicate the service out to schools, GPs, health visitors, and then parents themselves, it has risen. There will be a report coming to committee in the summer with an annual report, and there'll be statistical information in there about referrals. But we've seen the number increase, and the service itself is coping with the number of referrals that it's receiving. I think we should also bear in mind that not all referrals are picked up, because the triaging process means that some of them might not meet the threshold, or some of them in fact might be escalated to CAMHS. And again, just to remind committee that this service was really as an intention was to try and also have a layer of intervention prior to Tier 3 at CAMHS. So we'll bring that data to you in due course.
Thanks, Michael. Does that answer your question, Jim?
Yeah, thanks for that. But can I just ask one supplementary to it?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah, Michael, how quickly is there delays? How quickly do people normally get seen from the time of referral?
Through you, Convener. I don't have the exact timescales on it, but I mean, by the time the referral comes through, there's a regular triaging process, which has been weekly and then moved, I think, to fortnightly. So it's very rapid, and I mean, knowing 2 or 3 cases that we've dealt with through our forum, within I think a month or less than that, youngsters are being seen. So it's quite a quick response, if indeed the referral meets the threshold.
Okay, Jim.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just confirm that Colin user 4, is that Councillor Robertson back at the meeting?
It is. I was cut off
right.
for some reason, and I've had to phone back in again. I'm so sorry about that.
Okay.
No, that's okay, Elizabeth. I did come to you. Have you got any questions, Elizabeth?
It always happens just when people are coming to me about things. I do actually. I've got a couple of things. One's a question about moderation actually, and I'm kind of snitching on a family member who's a teacher in another local authority further north than this one, and they were complaining to me about duplication, really clunky process, and I was just wondering, when I was listening to them moaning and greeting about their process, if ours was the same, or if it's a national process that we're taking in terms of moderation, or if we've got control over how we're doing it. And I'm hoping that if we do, then we're not doing something that's duplicative and clunky.
Okay, I'll let Michael in there first, maybe.
Yep, through you, Convener. So at the moment, what we're doing is finalising an agreement with the schools as to the timeline between essentially now and the deadline, where we would press send on the outcomes going out. The process is designed not to be clunky. In fact, I was at a meeting this afternoon with head teachers, as Ruth referred to earlier on, in respect of where we would feel it would be best to place these additional days to facilitate the process. And in terms of our interaction as a local authority, because we will obviously want to quality assure as much as we possibly can the data, we were discussing today the best place to put inter-school, inter-departments across school moderation. So absolutely, that's at the forefront of our mind, to try and maximise still at this time the amount of teaching time, but recognising staff need time to also assess, mark, review, and potentially then repeat some teaching or do further teaching in response to what they're doing, as well as in engaging with moderation. So I think we've got a pretty thorough timeline, which means that we as a local authority will quality assure what schools are doing, and that what we're doing with our timeline meets the SQA timeline, so that we can be assured that there is that moderation that is manageable for staff.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Elizabeth?
Thank you. And just another comment rather than a question. And I going to just say I completely agree with what Lynn said earlier on. As a parent, I don't think I've ever felt more communicated with from the schools that I'm personally involved in. However, one mixed message that I do feel that I have seen, I just want to kind of bring it to the table, if that's okay. The schools have absolutely communicated that they understand that families are going to have to work flexibly, perhaps where there are children who have to share devices, or where they've got very young children who need parental support, but the parents are also trying to do their own work and all that kind of thing. So the flexibility is absolutely stated at every turn, but I do feel it's a little bit at odds with tracking attendance period by period, and I know that doesn't relate to the very young children, but even in terms of some of the logistical issues that we know some of our households have, we're sort of kind of, I feel the mixed message is unhelpful in terms of setting some people up to seemingly fail when we know fine well that they're not failing, they're getting the work done, they're just doing it at 10 o'clock at night. But the period by period attendance, I just felt was a mixed message from the flexibility message, which I felt was very helpful.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I'm going to let Ruth into that, and I think you've made that before, Elizabeth, and I think it is a good point. Ruth?
And it's something we've discussed back and forward, and absolutely the flexibility, because we know that different styles of learners, the Wi-Fi, interrupted learning, and that's why our model has tended to favour the recorded lessons, so we can allow that flexibility. And we did discuss with the head teachers about how we would track engagement lesson by lesson. The danger of it would be is that pupils were engaging in some topics but not others, or some parts of the curriculum and not others. And we needed to have some sort of way of looking at what it would be for, like, what the learner journey or the learner experience would be like out in homes. So I don't think it's probably one we were never absolutely going to get spot on. We probably had to do as well as we could. But it's a delicate balance, because you don't want learners to be able to opt out of areas of the curriculum, but you do want to give them that flexibility. Michael might say more, because I know he had a conversation with the head teachers about, again, following up what that engagement exactly might look like.
Yeah, Michael?
Yes, through you, convener. I mean, not much to add other than, yes, it was one of these ones that we talked through and talked through and talked through. I think on balance, we felt it was the right thing to do. And some parents have actually fed back that they appreciated knowing that level of detail. I think for us, it was more about if a call or contact communication was to be made at home, it was not to go in heavy-handed on it and to try and use that as a starter for a conversation to see if there was more support required. And on a couple of occasions, I know from 2 or 3 of the schools, it's actually meant that the young people have started to come into school a bit more, because through conversation with the parents, it was easier to maybe support them that way. So hopefully the experience has not been sort of a punitive one, and it's been in the spirit of trying to offer support.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Elizabeth, is that you okay?
That's brilliant, thank you. And sorry if I have mentioned that before. I'm not sure what I've said where anymore. So
Not at all, Elizabeth. It might have been somebody else. Elizabeth, it might have even been myself. Who knows? Can I ask, is there any more questions before we go to the recommendations in this? Can I just add my thanks? I know Stephen and Jim's done it. I think at the Education Committee, this is one of our strengths, that not only we got Stephen here giving us a national perspective from an elected member's point of view, but we've also got Paula from the union side, Francis from a former head teacher side, and probably more importantly, Lynn and Elizabeth giving us that parent and that guardian side of things as well. So I think that is good for scrutiny within, and of course Martin's an ex-teacher as well. Can I bring you to the recommendations, and can we agree the recommendations, especially the recommendations that is it 5.6 and 5.7? Yep.
Yep.
We agree. Thank you. And can we move along to the additional item, which is the S1 intake for Port Glasgow High School for the academic year 2021 to 2022. Ruth.
Okay, so this is asking for the committee to agree for us to increase the intake for Port Glasgow High School by 20, and we will always work in multiples of 20 in secondary schools for the academic year 21-22. The pupil placement panel met last week, and basically we had 100 intake for Port Glasgow High School. I would not recommend starting a year absolutely full. We would normally keep two places. So if we were to allocate those 2 places for within catchment area, that takes us to 102. And there is, so my recommendation to you strongly is to increase the 100 a year intake to 120. The school has capacity for this.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. I'll open up for any members for questions. I can't see any questions on the chat or indication. Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, John. I'm perfectly fine with the recommendations. It mentions in paragraph 2.3 the capacity is increased, then 10 placing requests into the school would be granted. Is that would be granted or could be granted?
If we increase to 120,
Yes.
then
And the pipeline.
Yep. Ruth?
okay.
So
So
are there 10 placing requests in the pipeline?
So basically, if we increase to 120, then we would have to approve all of the placing requests because there would be no legal basis to refuse them. So the 10 placing requests that we are aware of would have to be accepted.
Granted.
And where are those placing requests from? Which schools are they out of?
They are from various schools. I can't remember the exact details, but there are. I think there are a couple of schools across Inverclyde.
Okay, and my second question is around the capacity of the campus and the current role. You don't need to tell me this off the top of your head, but it would be useful to know what the current capacity is within the campus, certainly the secondary element of the campus, and what the current roles are and what the projections are.
Okay, Mr. Michael.
I can give you the exact numbers. I'm not off the top of my head, but I can email that to you. What I would say is when dealing with capacity, what you have to do is to be able to project forward. So that's why we always look at a maximum yearly intake, because you've got to keep going up because that's going to become S1 will become S2, S2 will become S3. In this particular situation, St Stephen's has less, so Port Glasgow High School can take more, but also you look further up the school to see if the years are full, and Port Glasgow has a year group which perhaps would release a practical set. So I can get the exact numbers to you.
No, I mean, I'm comfortable with this particular issue in isolation. I'm just curious as to what the current position is with regard to the capacity of the campus vis-a-vis the current school role, combined school role of the 2 secondary schools, and what we're projecting into the future, because we obviously know that there is pressure in a particular secondary school in Inverclyde, and we have obviously seen issues in placing requests into other secondary schools. I'm just interested to know, given the campus was built at a particular point in time with a particular capacity, and based on projections into the future, I'd be interested to know how things have turned out and what we see as the future sort of role projections v capacity.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Ruth, do you want to answer that now, or is it? I take it we normally get reports on placing requests at one of our education committees, and I assume that information that Stephen's looking for or asked for could be covered at that point in time.
Yes, absolutely. We've got 2 different sources of information. One is how many pupils are in the primaries, which tends to be a fairly good indicator. And looking at that, I'm not I've got no concerns as we go forward. It's not one that I would have a radar on to say that there are particular issues around the capacity of the whole of the joint campus. And we also have for the school estates modelling, we have the looking forward in the projections. I would say that from what I've seen, and I will re-look at it again because I haven't looked at it in the last month, there are certainly no concerns for the campus as I see them.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. Okay, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wilson, David.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to thank Ruth for the sight of this beforehand. I think it's a very encouraging report, this. I think that much praise is due to Stuart Clark in his time of being head there. The current head does seem to be carrying on the success that he generated amongst the school. There is also, I know from particularly Kilmacombe, there's less people going to Grive High now and choosing Port Glasgow High rather than Grive High. So it's all very encouraging. I support the report.
Thank you. I'll go to the phones. Elizabeth, first of all. Elizabeth, you get any comment on this?
Just a very brief comment. I think it's a lovely problem that we've been faced with that increasing our capacity of an S1 intake. I think it's a great problem for Port High to have.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. And Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Likewise, I think it's good to hear that there seems to be more interest, or I don't know, maybe we missed out something. I mean, we obviously a big issue within Inverclyde is about repopulation. Has there been a potential, or has there been an increase in the population in Port Glasgow in the last 10 years or so? I remember when we had all the discussions way back in 2008, before the school was built, before the campus was built, and we were looking at projected roles for Port Glasgow High School and St Stephen's, and the picture that was painted at that time was it was going to be another dwindling number of pupils attending both schools. So it is encouraging to see that there is, a pleasant surprise. No, it's pleasant to see that we have this issue of actually seeking more spaces at the school. So I think it's good news here. It'd be interesting to find out a bit more information where the children are coming from. Are they coming from Port Glasgow? David's mentioned some youngsters, perhaps instead of going to Grive or going down to Clyview Academy or wherever else, are seeking now to go to Port High, or if there's other children from Greenock perhaps coming to Port Glasgow as well. So yeah, I think it's a good story here. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jim. I'm going to let Tommy in to comment. Tommy?
Thanks, Jim. Just to follow on from Steve's point there, as we well know, there's potentially a couple of big planning applications coming in Greenock South West, and I think it would be useful to have some figures for the school roles and capacities, because I know you'll get them as part of the planning process, but these things tend to get into the media a good bit before that, and it would allow us to dispel some of the myths which you see. Schools are over capacity, schools are packed, all this type of thing. So I think it would be a good idea, maybe on an annual basis or whatever, but it would certainly help to explain things when you're attending community council meetings, different things like that.
Ruth, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, through you, convener, we bring an annual update on the placing requests, the amount we've refused, the amount we've accepted, and any schools that we would have concerns about going forward. So that'll be part of that. Would normally come to the May committee. We're only just processing the placing requests as we speak. But it's only this school that I'm bringing to committee to ask for any alterations.
Yeah. Tommy, is that okay?
Thanks, Ruth. I do appreciate that, but it's just as a general point, because I've seen some stuff on social media about the schools in Inverkip are packed to capacity in Wimsby, and I know that's not the case. It would just be useful to help us when we're at community meetings and we're talking to parents, that you can dispel some of these myths, just before it grows arms and legs. So I think it would be a useful start to have.
Okay. Yep, Ruth will take that on board. Can we agree the report?
Agree.
Thank you. And it only leaves me to thank Sharon for all our hard work during the education committees and keeping us on a straight and narrow road and doing such a great job with our committee papers. So for us, thank you very much, Sharon.
Thanks very much, convener. Thank you.
Yeah.